Welcome to CIO Central. I'm your host, Bill Miller, and we've got an exciting show for you today. But before we start, I wanted to let you know this is a momentous occasion, our 20th edition of CIO Central. Our guest is Sanjay Sood. He is the Chief Technology Officer of CDW. Sanjay, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Bill, and thanks for having me here.
You are an accomplished professional in terms of data mapping and data management. You have a PhD in computer science from Northwestern University, and you're a holder of more than a dozen patents in this space. Tell us a little bit about your personal migration from academia to industry.
My focus is really on information retrieval and artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that cross-section of how do you find humans information that they would find useful in any sort of context, whether they're watching television, whether they're surfing the web. So after I finished my PhD, instead of going to academia and being a college professor, which is what I initially wanted to do when I started the program, I saw a huge opportunity of taking the technology and the research that I was working on during grad school and applying it towards real world problems in industry. And so through that, I was able to work on some really cool cutting edge technology that had real commercial applications, where I worked for a couple startups, but then ended up working for some large companies, including AT&T Interactive, which turned into YP.com, the digital yellow pages. And so data has been really a common thread through my career, all the way to now CDW, and in between working for Here Technologies, working on digital maps. So I've had a good opportunity to see technology, innovation, disruption, machine learning in a whole bunch of industries. After I left YP, I actually went to Here Technologies, as you mentioned, which was another big data problem. So Here Technologies is a leading provider of digital maps and location services. So if you have a car with a navigation system, more than likely Here Technologies provides that data. So if you imagine building digital maps, it's a huge data aggregation and management problem. It's all about how do you aggregate that data, match it and merge it, and then produce these high quality digital maps. And so the final part of my career at Here was as you mentioned, working on a type of product called highly automated driving, and HD maps specifically. So these are what you can imagine being 3D representations of the roadway that help a self-driving car navigate the world. So it's kind of like an additional sensor. So if you've seen self-driving cars in the news, they have LiDAR, radar, cameras, but in the computer systems of those cars, they actually have these very, very high fidelity digital maps. So my job was to build that product to work with OEMs, car companies, tier ones, to develop that technology to integrate within their systems and then figure out how to make those maps up to date and reliable. So a huge data problem as well.
You're really transforming the CDW and around the user experience mindset. We all have our opinions as buyers about what that experience in that process should look like, but you're trying to transform technology and culture to support that at CDW. Tell us a little bit about how you're going about it.
CDW is going through a technology transformation in terms of how we manage our internal enterprise applications, how we manage the software and services that we deploy internally, but also how do we create those new experiences that help make our customers able to deploy their technology in a more efficient way. What we've realized over time is that technology can be a huge assistant in terms of just streamlining how technology is deployed and how it's used. We're working on full stack outcomes. So how do we look at not only software and services, but also professional services, managed services on top of that hardware to provide real full end-to-end solutions. So my job is very simple. It's how do you take technology, the technology that we use to run the business, and make that a competitive advantage for the business, right? And that's not only for how do we make our internal coworkers more productive, but also how do we make our partners more productive? How do we make our customers more productive? And so there's a set of initiatives, everything from how do we leverage data in a better way to make better business decisions, both how we run the business internally, but also for our partners, all the way to things like omnichannel selling and omnichannel capabilities. So that becomes a big thrust of our investment, and we're investing in new experiences, digital experiences.
You're looking at sort of this agile omni-channel delivery. And all the rage today is CX, right? It's the customer experience. I'm going to go on the website and order a keyboard and mouse, right? End of story. It's much more complicated than that today, isn't it? In the way customers come and engage with your company and the companies that you work with.
That hardware is just one layer of the productivity cake. On top of it, you have software that you're licensing, right? And how do you manage those licenses and deploy them and understand kind of your spend? You also have any sort of subscriptions that you have for services. You also have the life cycle of even the hardware, right? So you might buy that keyboard and mouse from CDW, but there's warranty information and that you want to keep track of, right, to make sure that you're getting serviced for those devices, as well as opportunities to renew, right? So when those laptops become out of service, what's the next technology that should be used? And how do you do that in a way that's proactive and automated? As opposed to you hearing out, from your employees that, oh my gosh, my laptop's slow and it's not working, I need something new. So there's a lot of intelligence in terms of recommendation on top of that. That's just on the client side. Now you think about, all the server work that we do kind of in the back end, hybrid cloud infrastructure, moving things to the cloud loads, getting multi-cloud visibility. And that also then goes into the whole notion around user experience, the consumerization of behavior when it comes to how people interact with technology and what they expect from technology. So let me give you a specific example. Whether it's Spotify, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, there's almost like a seamless flow between mobile experiences and desktop experiences. Now you juxtapose that to a lot of legacy internal enterprise systems, and it's like going back to the Stone Age, right? And I think that's going to be a driver in terms of how companies are going to have to think about their internal technology estates. Is how do you make those experiences as good as possible, right? And that's going to be looking at things like mobile experiences for internal applications. How do you make that experience really seamless? How do you work on performance, real-time availability? This whole notion of, hey, data is only available once a day or once a week. People want data real time. How do we really think about that from a product perspective, from a user experience perspective, from a usability perspective? Because those are going to be the expectations that we're going to see moving forward. And that's going to be the norm from now on.
You're partnered with thousands of companies, companies like NetApp. How do we partner better and work closer together, in your opinion, to deliver that exceptional value to our mutual customers?
The way that we go to market and approach the customer always has to be thinking about full stack, right? What are those outcomes that the customer wants? How do we work together, both from your perspective of providing a hardware and a platform, but then our ability to bring in kind of all those capabilities that surround that hardware in terms of services and adjacent capabilities, and then bring that to the customer all at once. I mean, at the end of the day, the customers, they want to focus on their core business. They don't want to have to worry about what's happening in the back end, right? They want to be able to have that all with trusted partners that can deliver on time, in budget, and then have a great experience with them. There's another thing, which is really the logistics part of this, which I think is another area that we're working and looking to work with partners very closely as well. So if you think about the supply chain, right, that's put a lot of stress on CIOs all over the place in terms of, when can I get this in? And how can I then coordinate all the work that has to go either before a piece of hardware arrives in my data center or even afterwards, right? And so we're working with a lot of our partners of how do we get really high quality data when it comes with the supply chain, all the way down to logistics and shipping, right? Because that becomes a very important part, because we're one part of the supply chain for them, right? And then we have a supply chain that we're managing behind the scenes. So there's a lot of complexity there. So I think there's going to be, a renewed focus on the complexity of delivery, specifically because of the supply chain. And that's in addition to that whole customer experience that we're talking about, is coming to full stack outcomes, making sure that we're having a consultative approach, and that we're delivering above and beyond those expectations of the customer.
What do you see influencing all of our agendas over the next 5 years or so, specifically around machine learning?
The business that we do, a lot of it has to do with relationships, right? And how do we make those relationships as easy and seamless as possible? That's where I think machine learning can help a lot, by being very much a proactive assistant to those relationships in terms of, well, what's happened in terms of describing those, those relationships. How do you then get to predictive, right? And then how do you get to prescriptive? I mean, that's really that chain. So what we're thinking about a lot is We have a ton of data about what people are buying, right, from our customers. We have a ton of data on supply chain, right? We have a ton of data about professional services and how they're being implemented and derived. And we just have a ton of that human insight, right? And what we're trying to figure out is how do you build those right models? How do you collect that data in a way that helps us make better informed decisions, but also provide feedback to our partners, including companies like NetApp, in terms of what we're seeing in the industry in an aggregate form that scales. And then ultimately, that's all about driving more value to the customer. So how can we get to them in a way that is helping them understand things about their environment or their estate that maybe they didn't. If you think about recommendation and what Amazon's done for recommendation in terms of consumer buying, I think CDW has a great opportunity with the type of data that we collect, the type of algorithms we can put on top of it to help drive that type of recommendation experience for many of our customers.
When we spoke the other day, you brought up a phrase I really liked, and you said, making sense of data at scale. And kind of what you were just talking about feels like making sense of data at scale. How do you take the principles from what you were doing at here and apply them around data at CDW?
The data manipulation kind of data management problem is something that, in many cases, especially advanced cases, is very hard to 100% automate. What we've done, and one of the things that I've taken to heart in terms of how I build these types of systems is don't go for the perfect solution. Go for something that's 80, 90% accurate, and then build very easy to use workflows to correct the rest of it, right? And that actually ends up being a much more efficient, scalable way of doing things by, essentially using humans to do the hard things that machines are really tough at, right? Now, if you're going to take that even a step further, as you continue to do that, as you push data through, you correct it using humans, you end up having a lot of data that helps improve the algorithm. We're doing actually a project around, trying to do some data science on top of product families. And so as we try to automate ways of grouping that to help humans understand it, it's something you can't do manually, and it's something that you can't do completely automated. So how do you build those right workflows to make sure that this can work at scale, to collect the feedback data and then make those algorithms and improve them over time?
So we see this inexorable move to the cloud, but there's also this new incredible power based in the edge, right? In edge networks and how data can be accumulated and processed on the edge. How do you see these architectures emerging in playing into this data analysis challenge?
It's an interesting problem because, the more you move to the edge, right? And I spent a lot of time thinking about edge and working actually on systems for edge processing for self-driving cars. There's a lot of power on it. You still have to aggregate from the edge. So it helps you kind of spread the workload, but you still ultimately have to bring it all together if your goal is to create solid global representations of something. But I do see, especially with 5G, the capability of doing a lot of processing on the edge, that we're going to see all sorts of interesting use cases where potentially even localized representations, in a geography or a region.
Is there kind of a whole emerging science around how we get better and better at bringing that current data in and making sense out of it in a hurry?
There's streaming data, of course, where that's been the recent shift towards batch processing. I can imagine that, most companies out there that have been around have jobs that are on a scheduler. There's a cost that comes to streaming, first of all, especially when you're moving data at large quantities across multiple areas. Those companies that have workloads, it's always important to understand which ones need to be done real time. It's not that everything has to go to real time. It's just those use cases where that type of insight or that type of expectation is what your customer needs.
Sanjay, NetApp is going through an interesting transformation. We started out as what I would consider to be the world's best storage provider. It was a combination of software and hardware system solutions, and really transitioning to be a full-fledged cloud services provider around data. You're going through similar transformations around services and added value that you're bringing to your customers. How do you see those as similar and value added?
One of the recent announcements that we made late last year was we acquired Sirius Computer Solutions, a very large services company based out of San Antonio. This is really part of that next evolutionary step for CDW, is how do we get more into those full stack offerings, including managed services, solutions, services, professional services on top of that, right? And that includes other acquisitions that we made in the last 18 months across a variety of industries, all focused on growing that services portfolio. So if you think about that relationship between then CDW and NetApp, is I think that evolution on both sides helps us offer those full stack solutions to our customers, right, together. And that's actually a very powerful combination, because that's what most CIOs and IT departments want, is they want fewer touch points, fewer vendors, bigger solutions that go full stack. So it just makes their lives easier, and they can focus on what makes their business special and driving value to their customers.
How do you find new ideas and chart a new future with rapidly changing technology every day?
Having conversations, Bill, with you and other folks in the industry is definitely a source of inspiration and recharging. What I do is I like spending time with my coworkers at various parts of the organization, right? And that's something where you actually can walk a little bit in their shoes, understand kind of the challenges that they're having. That helps you ground a lot of the technology and a lot of what I'm trying to drive in real world situations. It's about real issues that our customers are facing, or our coworkers are facing. The biggest source of inspiration is getting really deep into the problems. Even as an executive, like spending that time to really understand, and then track the ways that we can solve those problems over in the arc of a project or a program, to make sure that you can actually measure those outcomes. Because not everything needs to be done at once, right? And so that's going to be something that's pretty important, is right time and place for moving the needle when it comes to technology adoption, and understanding really those business scenarios and the business case for making those types of investments.
Sanjay, we really appreciate this. Thanks for taking your time today to join us. It's really been informative.
Thanks a lot for having me, Bill, and congratulations on episode number 20.
That's it for CIO Central today. Go back and look at some of those previous episodes of CIO Central, and remember to stay data-driven.